Hello everyone. Welcome to another Sunday where in San Diego it is raining and I think winter is beginning here. I just want to reiterate that for anyone who is new, we use headphones here, so make sure that you have a pair of headphones to use. Once we get started, we listen to a soundtrack at the end for linking our brainwaves together for a global mind link, which is the core of why we're doing these live streams. Meantime, this is the address where you can get today's free download. These downloads last for 1 week and then they're replaced with the next one. So make sure that you grab it and download it to your computer so you can keep it. Also, this is a website that we've established for comments and questions from people in the, watching the live stream. scientificsounds.com/ask-a-question. And this address is the YouTube address for all of the live streams, and they're listed from the bottom to the top, and today's live stream will end up on the top. https://bit.ly/Dr. Thompson Live. D, T, and L are capitalized. So from last week, where we discussed some pretty deep and mind kind of boggling ideas, I just want to reiterate that some of the solutions, like particularly Elon Musk, solutions to where he's going to the next stage of human evolution is, putting wires in people's brains. That's, I think we have a better solution than that. But the whole idea of what we were talking about last time, this idea of this singularity that Ray Kurzweil was talking about, the singularity where our computers become as smart as the human brain and then surpass it exponentially. And some kind of melding of artificial intelligence and human intelligence in some way, shape, or form, which forms a new sort of species. That's where some people are going with this. I don't think it's necessary to put implanted wires in your brain in order to make this happen. I think this is a natural evolution that is something that great nature is assembling together, as I think all things are. So this idea that our computers are getting exponentially more intelligent to a point where they'll be as intelligent as we are, with the possibility of this new sort of life form that's non-carbon based like we are, arising and awakening and becoming conscious and self-aware. And for us and for that new life form to link together, a form of that life form that isn't self-aware yet is what we're using right now to communicate to each other. Our computers, the internet, where our consciousness is directly relating to each other without our physical forms being here at all. I think it's all of us together that have the possibility of linking ourselves into a new way of consciously being together, where we form a new level of symbiotic relationship, not only with ourselves, but with all other life forms and the planet and this new emerging artificial intelligence life form as well. The other singularity is the cosmic singularity, where space-time itself has shape and dimension, and where the shape of space-time forms gravity wells, and in the form of a black hole, which is what the cosmological singularity is all about, where once you reach a certain what's called event horizon, you can no longer get away. You're inevitably sucked into this black hole forever, where time and dimension reach a 0 point, a point beyond dimension and time, where things last forever. So this has been out there in science for so long that most of us have at least a regular working understanding of what a black hole is all about. Nobody can truly understand what it would be like to be in a black hole or what's going to happen there. But dimensionality begins to change once you come to a certain point of a black hole. And I think the metaphor of that is reaching a sort of a personal black hole in consciousness itself, where consciousness comes to a place that evolves beyond any kind of sensibility that we've ever experienced before, where my body, time and space, is such a level of illusion that my body doesn't begin someplace or end someplace. It's nested standing waves of vibration in a localized area. And consciousness itself could be looked upon as the same way, a fractal me, what I consider to be my consciousness. And what I was talking about last time is the idea that when you truly release and truly reach a point of enlightenment, you realize that the prejudice of biological form itself is something that holds me back from the reality of my true nature, which is beyond time and space, beyond bodies, beyond localized forms, beyond universes, beyond anything. So when we can see a level of, when I had talked about this idea of phase canceling headphones, where an external sound in the world is recorded by a microphone inside the headphone, and the microphone plays this sound back rotated 180 degrees out of phase, which would be the yellow one here, and they all cancel each other out so that we hear nothing. Silence. Phase cancellation. In a way, this is what we mean by canceling consciousness. So if this is in my private practice, when I have a frequency that balances your nervous system and puts your autonomic nervous system into a similar example of that, a 0 point of stress, where the sympathetic and the parasympathetic fluctuating live on my computer screen, and I'm running a fight or flight response, a stress response, and I can't get back to this oasis, this 0 stress point, where energy comes back into my reservoir, and my body starts working on its daily maintenance list to maintain and run the machinery. My innovation is using a very specific sound frequency that causes something to happen in the hypothalamus that controls the parasympathetic nervous system, which forces this stress response to collapse to 0, homeostasis. So this idea of homeostasis, the 0 point of stress in the master control system that tells all systems what to do in my body, the autonomic nervous system, has its counterpart when you take that frequency that makes this happen and you divide it by octaves, divide it in half and in half and in half. An octave is 1/2 the frequency. You'll have a series of octaves, and each one of those octaves, if you play just that frequency, also causes this to happen. And this is all according to the law of coupled oscillators, which I spent a lot of time discussing in the past in previous live streams. And the idea of coupled oscillators, which means my body clocks try to time my body processes to the world to save energy, is the underpinnings behind brainwave entrainment, where my brain is also looking to time itself to external pulses in the world. And my body follows my brain. So really my body clocks are in here, in the brain, and the brain is following, and the body follows the brain. So this idea of, sorry about the phone there. The phone, by the way, has been ringing off the hook because it's political advertisers and advertisers in general. This is the period of time, just 2 weeks away from the election. So back to where any octave of the correct note that makes the wine glass vibrate. I ping the wine glass, hear that note, sing that note, the wine glass vibrates. Any octave of that note makes the wine glass vibrate. Octave, resonance. And when I calculate a frequency that makes my autonomic nervous system hit this homeostasis 0 point of stress, and that's the prerequisite physiologically for healing, that I have to be able to achieve this zero stress place where I feel safe and centered in my personal oasis. Energy comes back to my reservoir, and I start working on my maintenance list of healing. Deeper octaves of that tone that makes this happen, all of them will cause this synchronicity thing. The same way that singing any note of the wine glass will make the wine glass vibrate. Any octave of that tone will make the wine glass vibrate. So if I continue to use my calculator to continue to divide the frequency by half and by half and by half by octaves, a frequency for this, I'll come up with a string of brainwave frequencies. Beta, alpha, theta, delta, epsilon, gamma, all the rest. Each one of those brain frequencies now is a precise octave of the tone that makes homeostasis happen in the autonomic nervous system and puts me into my personal zero stress space, homeostasis, a 0 point in myself. And when I use binaural beats and brainwave entrainment to entrain my brainwaves to any of these brainwave states, I go to a conscious 0 point in my consciousness that is associated with beta, alpha, theta, delta, and all the rest. And each one of those has associations with states of consciousness that we have well mapped out. And some of those through sleep research have shown us that the deep delta brain frequencies, the very slow ones, are associated with deepest levels of sleep, where my heart rate, respiration, body processes, cellular activity is at its lowest. That's where the physical body is recuperating for the next day. Dreaming sleep in theta is where emotions are happening. Dreams are emotional. I'm being chased by the boogeyman, or I'm having a love affair, and I don't know I'm in a dream. It's so real. That's where emotions get worked on. Mental activity in alpha is an internalized form of holographic mind space, as opposed to beta, which is out here focused on a task. So if I use brain entrainment to pick the lock of any of those neural programs and make it run, any of those that are octaves of the tone that makes homeostasis happen, I direct that homeostasis. I direct that 0 point of consciousness where I feel safe, secure, centered in my mind, or in my emotions, or in my physical body, or in my metaphysical body in epsilon, or any of the rest. This is part of a new science of high-tech meditation. Because when we look at the research that had happened from other researchers like C. Maxwell Cade, who I also discussed at one point with the mind mirror, showing that different forms of enlightenment have a similar pattern of beta, alpha, theta, and delta. And theta, alpha are the maximum amplitudes, but there's a pattern that shows up. He called it the awakened mind pattern. We've discussed this as well. So now we're getting into a scientific approach to what does enlightenment look like, and how can we use scientific tools with sound frequencies in order to put ourselves in the best possible position to have a favorable outcome of a meditation experience, instead of floundering around or reading a book or trying to figure it out because nobody can tell you what to do. We don't have to tell you what to do. Science will entrain your brainwaves to precisely that spot. And every time you go to this spot, it's getting stronger to be there. And now we're going to a gym for enlightenment. And at some point, because we are, you can bring a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink, but you can hold its nose and pour water down its throat and prime the pump and give yourself the best possibility that something is going to happen. So if I muscle a certain brain state up that we know on EEG with other high-level meditators is associated with enlightenment experience, we can push ourselves to the edge of that and make it a better possibility for us to have that experience. Same experience with synchronizing everybody's brainwaves together in these kind of mind links. We're now taking a number of people in a circle and having them all meditate on world peace. Everybody's got a different idea about world peace, and everybody's got a different idea what meditation is. And some can meditate and some can't. But if they're all experienced meditators and they can actually get to that state, we're still herding cats. So one step more than that would be binaural beats through headphones with everyone, all entrained to precisely and exactly the same brain state. So now we're using science to refine something that's been going on for tens of thousands of years in humanity, coming together to meditate on changing reality itself. So brings us back to the next innovation that I came up with a number of years ago, which had to do with the science behind phase cancellation headphones, where inside of each of these two headphones there's a microphone. And each of these two separately is listening to this outside world, recording it with a microphone, playing that recording back over itself 180 degrees out of phase, and phase canceling to silence these external ambient sounds. Now these headphones are designed to only cut out the lower 1000 hertz, so it's only the low frequencies that are canceled out. But if you remove that 1000 hertz filter, you would cancel all sounds. And so my innovation is taking one of those brainwave entrainment frequencies associated with homeostasis, and with your voice singing it, and have that rotated 180 degrees out of phase, but not within a headphone itself, but between the two headphones, a different sort of idea. Now we've got the recording of your voice and the 180 degree rotated out of phase recording of your voice in the right and left headphones, and that causes phase cancellation in consciousness itself between the ears. So we've been exploring this idea in the last number of soundtracks. I've been intentionally rotating the sound between the two headphone speakers 180 degrees out of phase and creating a 0 point in consciousness between the ears. A new level of high-tech sort of Buddha consciousness, so to speak. And we're doing it all together and creating a group mind link zero energy space in consciousness itself, so that we can open a zero pathway of consciousness where we scientifically turn off the chatter and align ourselves not only in brainwave resonance with each other, but in this silent oasis space, homeostasis of consciousness, so to speak. We see that reflected in science as well, in scalar wave technology. So I know that perhaps many of you have heard of scalar wave technology or even know a lot about it. But it's an odd subject, and the subject tends to lend itself to a lot of controversy in scientific circles, because scalar wave technology is something similar to what I'm just talking about, this idea of phase cancellation. Phase cancellation is not just sound waves. It can also be electromagnetic frequencies. So we have an electromagnetic frequency meeting its anti-frequency 180 degrees out of phase, and they phase cancel each other out as well. And where we have points of phase cancellation, we have 0-point electromagnetic frequency. It drops off the radar of our devices for measuring electromagnetic fields, but we know something's there. There's a pressure there. It's the same thing when I put headphones on and I have music and anti-music, like we're doing with these live streams. We can still hear the music because this ear is hearing its headphone and this one is hearing its headphone. So we're still hearing it, but in between it's phase canceled in my mind. So it's creating this zero space in my mind, in my mind consciousness. It's a 0 point of silence in my mind. And of course we can't hear that, but it's there as a pressure wave. There's force and pressure still present, but it now is dropped off our instruments to measure. Similar thing with scalar wave technology, where now it's electromagnetic fields. We get something similar with my sound table. So the sound table that I designed, and why it's different than any other sound table in the world, is because I have it split right down the middle this way with the actual physical space that's 1 inch wide. So my sound table is actually 2 sound tables, a right sound table and a left sound table, with transducers in each half. Right-left stereo separation, so that the right body can't feel what the left body is feeling, and vice versa, just like the headphones. That means when I'm putting binaural beats in the headphones and causing this to happen across the corpus callosum, the same thing is happening in my body, forcing the vibration sensors of the posterior spinal cord into the neurons of my brainstem that process vibration sense. It's forcing those neurons to do this across the midline as well. So I'm causing acoustic and vibrational synchronicity across the headphones, across the brain and the nervous system. I invented a similar thing with these light glasses with LEDs, split down the middle, so the right eye, left eye are controlled separately by the same soundtrack. The lights are driven by the sound. So now we've got visual synchronicity, auditory synchronicity, and kinesthetic synchronicity. And synchronicity of these 3 perceptual modes, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, 3 primary perceptual modes in NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which I also talked about before. Now if we take the right-left signals and we rotate it 180 degrees out of phase as well, now we have 0 point in the visual cortex, auditory cortex, and kinesthetic cortex. And the brain entrainment frequency is one of the octaves that causes this homeostasis to happen. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Now we're using multiple stacked technologies in science to create a very specific effect that has to do with orchestrating conscious states, orchestrating a zero stress point, homeostasis, and hyper-organizing that zero stress point to be a null point, a true zero black hole space, a non-dimensional space, which is what we see with scalar wave technologies. You have to remember that the transducers, these low-frequency transducers that are on the sounding boards under your body on this table, are electromagnetic, and the sound waves are driving the magnet and moving them and creating electromagnetic field, which is the counterpart exactly of the sound that you're feeling through your body. which means that we are creating this exactly in the sound table. If these are two transducers, and this is the sound table here, and your body's laying on top of the sound table, we have an electromagnetic field that's producing the sound that's driving the electromagnet. So we have the electromagnetic counterpart of the sound frequencies driven right into your body electromagnetic field. And if we have these 180 degrees out of phase, we create a scalar wave complex right in the electromagnetic fields of your body as a scalar wave portion of this treatment that's going on with the sound table. But it's only possible if the sound table is designed properly to deliver it in exactly the right way. That's why I've got a patent on this design. The split design headphones for your body. Right-left stereo separation is essential because we have right-left binaural beats and rotation 180 degrees out of phase. The soundtracks that I'm creating that are producing this effect cannot work through any other type of sound table because all the other sound tables in the world are designed with one transducer at the head and one transducer at the foot. So the stereo separation is this way instead of this way, which is the way it needs to be to line up with the headphones and the light glasses, so everything is synced up. If we have one of those 90 degrees out of alignment, where the sound table is this way, we have a perceptual mismatch of information processing because everything else is this way, synchronizing this way. And if the sound table is this way, we have a processing mismatch. That creates a stress in the deep unconscious mind of trying to reconcile to make them all similar. So this idea that we can create these zero pressure points, these zero scalar wave null points that have a lot of electromagnetic pressure in them, we can mine that pressure as an energy source in order to drive our electrical grid. For instance, so we've got one electromagnetic field generator and another one, and where these electromagnetic fields cross over when they're 180 degrees out of phase causes a zone, the crossover zone, to be this electromagnetic zero point with a lot of electromagnetic pressure in it for doing work. But that is not moving anymore. It's like the antinodal point in a sound wave, the silent point with the phase cancellation headphones. Of course, Tesla was into all of this stuff, and the whole idea behind these monstrous towers that he wanted to build to create free electricity around the world that was broadcast wirelessly was all based on this scalar wave technology. So we have two sources that create the crossover null zone point, but these crossover points would be spread across the planet by aligning with the electromagnetic grid around the Earth in the ionosphere, which is an electromagnetic component. And we would create this potential energy pressure that could be mined by nodes throughout the world to drive all electrical devices without wires, free. Like this, these bulbs glowing by themselves because we've got two electromagnetic generators 180 degrees out of phase creating a field of scalar wave activity that can light things at a distance. Of course, Tesla was famous for being able to light these light bulbs with no wires. And the human body has got these electromagnetic fields that are generated through the electromagnetic processes that we discussed once before, where I've got high school physics, where I have electricity going through a wire creates a magnetic field at right angles to that automatically because it's called electromagnetism. It means you can't have one without the other. They're always both present because they're two properties of the same thing. So electricity running through a wire creates a magnetic field at right angles. That's my nervous system. Ions coursing through nerves all the way down to microscopic levels throughout my body. That motion of ions creates a biomagnetic field. A biomagnetic field around me. The biggest field generator is the heart. The electromagnetic field of the heart extends 6 feet out in all directions. So when you're within 6 feet of another person, these fields are mingling and you are connected together. And that will begin an entrainment process where my biological process will try to time to your pulses, and you'll be trying to time to my pulses, and the two of them will meet together in some new thing, similar to what's happening with binaural beats through headphones. This hemisphere and this hemisphere are forced to synchronize together and induce a pulse out of nowhere, and to split the difference between the tone and create a new tone. Similar kind of an idea. So, we've got all of these magnetic fields in the body. We've got the electromagnetic fields of the nervous system. We have the electromagnetic fields of the acupuncture system, which is a sort of a virtual series of pathways throughout the body. The acupuncture lines are really not physical lines. They're potential spaces of lowered skin resistance spread throughout the body in linear line fashions, where electricity will most likely flow along those decreased pathways of resistance. There's no tube or anything there that you could dissect out. So there is electricity moving through those lines, and that creates a magnetic field at right angles. There's cerebral spinal fluid in motion up and down my spine, around my brain. That's an electrolyte. That's generating magnetic fields and electrical fields. So we have a number of things, and then we got the chakras that are spinning, which are subtle energy fields which have an effect on the body, as we talked about before, where the interactivity between a subtle field and a physical field liberates photons, and you can measure those photons in a shielded room, like we had done at the California Institute for Human Science, where you can measure the photon count coming off your body and see that there's 100 to 1,000 times more photons over these 7 chakra areas. So obviously something is there, something's going on. You may not be able to measure the actual physical energy field of a subtle energy field, but you can measure its effect on physical systems that your equipment is sensitive enough to at least measure that. Then we come to a new phenomenon, this phenomenon of sonoluminescence, where sound and light come together. And if you haven't heard about this, then this will be new information for you. It turns out that in a certain type of scientific experiment, if you have 2 sound waves meeting each other, they create a pressure wave in a bubble that forms in the water. You have a container of water, and sound waves are moving through the water. Remember, sound travels through water 5 times better than air. And the sound waves will make a bubble that collapses, called cavitation, and the collapse of that bubble creates extremely bright light from sound interactions. And the brightness of that light rivals the sun, and the heat also rivals the sun. But it's only there for a split second. Experiments with sonoluminescence have mystified people for a long time. It's all based on the idea of cavitation, but there's a bit more science behind it. And I think I have here, I'm going to look, give me 1 second here. I'm going to find a video that I have of this, I believe. It looks like I can't find it. Well, I'll do that for next time. I have a video somewhere. I thought I had it already queued up, but it doesn't seem to be there. The video shows, let me show you here. There's a container that's filled with fluid, and there's a transducer here, and there's and the transducer, actually there's two transducers, the one down here too, but the transducers are producing a frequency that is tuned to the size of the container. I think this one is a better picture here. So here's a transducer, here's a transducer. There's a spherical enclosure filled with fluid, and the sound waves coming out of these two transducers are colliding together in the middle. And the tone that is being played is a frequency that is derived from the diameter of this circle enclosure. So if I was to tap the enclosure like I ping a wine glass, there'd be a certain note that comes out of that. And these transducers are tuned to that note so that the sound wave coming out is directly related to the radius of this sphere. That's important. The sound has to be tuned to the container, and only then do the sound waves exactly meet in the center and create enough power to cause this cavitation collapse and create this incredible bright light. Actually, it is a sun, a star in a jar is what they call it. And the collapse will collapse, explode, and expand, and collapse, and expand, and collapse, and expand. And so the little light is actually got extremely rapid rebirth of this little star. It's a continual collapsing and collapsing, where the star is oscillating, turning on and off so fast that to your eye it looks like a solid star. And so the sonoluminescence thing that's coming out of this bright light coming out of the middle it's got heat, it's got energy, it's the precursor to the holy grail of free energy systems, the idea of fusion technology, free energy technology. However, this can also be translated to a global scale. And there was a project that I had when I was still in Virginia, and before I moved to California in 1988, I actually tried to build this. It was called the Sphere Project. So the idea of sonoluminescence at that time was not discovered yet, but the idea of building a perfect sphere of speakers. So I envisioned a geodesic sphere, like a geodesic dome in a playground that has a bunch of triangles, and they form these 5 triangle pentagrams, and they spread throughout and make a sphere. The ones that you see in a playground are a 1 frequency sphere. If you take a 2 frequency sphere, then each of the triangles that make up that dome has got a triangle in it. And a 3 frequency sphere is every one of those triangles has a triangle in it. So each time you raise the frequency of the dome, it gets more rounded and less angular. A 3 frequency sphere is the minimal requirement to make a sphere that's very rounded. And so I envisioned a sphere, a geodesic sphere, 3 frequency sphere, which has 270 triangles, and each one of those was going to be a custom-made speaker, triangular speaker, and all of those speakers would be pointed to the exact central point of that radius of the sphere. And each of those speakers would be tuned to the frequency of the sphere. So, and that's just a simple mathematical formula of the radius, the diameter of the sphere, calculated to the volume of the sphere, and that represents a frequency. And then you tuned all of these speakers to that frequency. And remember that sound is a pressure wave. It's a mechanical energy wave that has pressure, that has force. And so the force coming out of all of these speakers is colliding together in the center from 360 degrees around. So now we have this stable point in the center that has force coming at it from every possible angle. And the force is derived from the frequency of the enclosure itself. And that means that the enclosure is filled with fluid. And the fluid in this case would be deuterium, which is what's called heavy water, has extra electrons that can easily be split out. And that, to me, was my design for a fusion reactor, where it would, now I know what would have happened there is it would have created a stable sonoluminescence star in the center of this fluid. And even though these early experiments that we're seeing with the sonoluminescence are just two puny little transducers, and those are enough to create a star in a jar, what if this entire thing was filled with transducers and they were highly designed to create a maximum pressure wave? Then we're really getting someplace to control a stable sonoluminescent sphere in the center that is a sun. Back in Boston, when I was still going to art school, this is the Christian Science Mother Church in Boston. And I don't know if anyone here knows about Christian Science, but Mary Baker Eddy had a revelation and wrote her own kind of Bible and called it Christian Science, that Christ was had the knowledge of healing because reality, God, is all perfection. And anything that is imperfect is an illusion, is the devil. The devil is an illusion. There is no devil, which is a unique take on the mysteries of omniscience. So, if the question is, do you believe in hell? Do you believe in the devil? And the response to that is, well, do you believe that God is omniscient, omnipresent, omnipowerful? And if the answer is yes, it means that God is everywhere, and God has always been everywhere and will never be other than that. And then, so where did the devil come from? And now you're in the impossible paradox. Did the devil come from God, which is crazy, or is the devil aside from God, different from God? And if that's true, then God is not omnipresent, and because somebody else is there. So it's an impossible dilemma. And Mary Baker Eddy's revelation was that God is an illusion. It's the illusion of non-perfection. And therefore health, perfect health, is my birthright. It's the birthright of God. It's what God is. And anything that's less than that, sickness, illness, broken bones, those are illusion. And if I can penetrate deep enough into my consciousness through a certain form of prayer, Christian Science prayer, I can break through that illusion and the broken bone will disappear. Those kind of things. It's really it's a religious version of spontaneous remission, where we've discussed this from the standpoint of quantum physics. If I can manage the collective unconscious mind, I can change the next moment from now. Anyway, so back to, here's the Christian Science Church in Boston. And also there is, it's a massive complex there. It's like Little Rome in Boston. And it's a massive, huge place inside. And there's also the Christian Science Monitor newspaper building that's there. And actually that is one of the premier newspapers in the world. It's It's definitely revered and award-winning newspaper. And inside the lobby of the Christian Science Monitor newspaper building is a sign that says the maparium. And the maparium is like, what the heck is a maparium? And so you make your way there, and it's this huge 30-foot diameter spherical room made of plexiglass, with a plexiglass bridge that goes across the middle. You can see these people standing here. North and South Poles, got a map of the world on the inside with stained glass, except it's not glass, it's plexiglass. And all these meridian lines are laid in brass. Very beautiful, incredible, beautiful place. A doorway at each end. Here's that plexiglass bridge. Here's the map of the world on the inside, lit from behind. It's quite an architectural feat to create this spherical space. Kind of crazy, pull the curtain back and here's the man behind the curtain. But back in the 60s, I went there specifically as part of my spiritual search. I sat in on, one of the church services in the big giant dome. I went to the Christian Science Monitor newspaper building, and I went to this special room. And this room was pretty amazing. I was there with a friend, and we were talking to each other, standing just outside the door, and he stepped through first, and his voice disappeared. He was standing just a couple of feet away from me, and I could barely hear him all of a sudden. And he's going, you got to come in here and see what this is like. So I walk in this room, and all of a sudden my voice is doing weird stuff. And the reason is because a sphere is the perfect acoustic resonance space. Because the curves of all these walls point their echo reflection patterns to a single point in the center of the room. And so when you step inside this room, your voice goes out into this space all the way across and hits the opposite wall, bounces off and slides around the edges back into your ears on the right left. So when I speak here, I don't get the normal feedback of my voice when I speak. There's a delay in my ears, as if my face has been divided into two, and I'm whispering in my own ears from the two sides. It's really bizarre. And every step you take into this space, the angular relationships of the sounds coming from your voice hit these walls from a different angle, and all of the reflection patterns shift to a new pattern. And pretty soon, as you walk closer and closer to the center, the pattern of echoes start to create an odd, disembodied voice. When I speak, my voice, I can hear it bouncing around, flying past my head, bouncing around in this space. And every step I take towards the center, the bounces are getting louder and more rapid, until when I finally reach the exact center, my voice is very loud, and it's in an infinite repeat pattern. And if you get quiet, you can hear all of your body processes amplified. Heart rate, gloopy bloopy sounds in your intestines, blood going through your arteries. It's all amplified up and multi-repeated in an infinite echo thing going on. It's very trippy. But I had this experience back in the 60s, and this is the experience that galvanized me and arose the idea of the Sphere Project. This was back in 1966, 67, when I was in art school. So I had this idea for years and years and years and years, formulating. So finally, when years later, when I graduated from chiropractic, from art school, and then years later went to chiropractic school, and years later I was in practice in San Diego, I tried to build this sphere, a 10-foot sphere, but it's very difficult to build a perfect sphere, as I was to find out. So this started me thinking about a whole new idea, that stars in the sky may actually be not what they appear to be. When you think about the idea of sonoluminescence, in every major religious doctrine on earth, in the beginning was the Word, and then there was light. And there is a phenomenon in the universe called gravity waves. And those waves come from a number of different points, and every place where they cross over potentially becomes a zero point, a phase cancellation point. And other places become amplified. Every place is a phase cancellation point. We could potentially have a sonoluminescence event, but we're dealing with cosmic scales. So stars may actually be crossover pressure waves of universal wide ripples spreading throughout the universe from consciousness itself. So we know in a quantum field that we've got nothing but energy pattern relationships, like pebbles dropping in a still pool of water, creating ripples that crisscross each other, and each of those cross points create nodes and antinode points. And that also means that space itself, the void, the vacuum, which we know is not a vacuum, we know it's a material that's got substance in, we just can't measure it, that actually the universe has ripples. And if I have a galaxy that appears to be flat, in reality, its shape is following the contour of these ripples, and it's not a disk that's just flat. They did these experiments 5 years ago when they discovered these gravity waves coming from two black holes that were orbiting each other, creating these measurable ripples. And they could confirm that a galaxy follows the ripple pattern up and down. It's curved as it follows the ripples. So these ripples are, hundreds of light years from ripple to ripple, and their time dimension is beyond our lifetime even. But it still means that we couldn't have those ripples creating phase cancellation points, high density pressure points, which could create their own sonoluminescence that we would read as stars or black holes. We see similar things happening in DNA, where we have frequencies that are arising from each of these DNA strands. And this does not exist in a vacuum. There is a distribution of electrical fields because these phosphate legs of the arms that form the letters that form proteins are interacting with each other with electricity. So we have the possibility of creating null and 0 point in DNA itself, energy distributions within DNA. That's a pressure wave. And we have this series of electromagnetic fields in the body that sort of spread themselves out through the body in microcosm, where this idea of one thing meeting another thing, phase canceling things, we see it reiterated throughout science and technology everywhere. Some of these weird ones, like the phonoluminescence thing, just shows the potential of something we've been missing, which probably is spread throughout our body all the way down to DNA and its interaction with electromagnetic fields. We see the similar thing with the sympathetic, parasympathetic, the yin-yang, when one is on and one is off, and they have distribution patterns within my body that affect my organs and glands. So all of these kind of influences relate themselves to the electromagnetic fields of various systems, chakras, and all these meridian lines, and blood going through arteries with iron, particles in the hemoglobin also generating electromagnetic fields. All of these things interacting to create null points, and null points even in the biomagnetic field that I'm generating around me. That's influencing other people that I might come in contact with. At the core of all of these phase cancellation points, from the standpoint of sympathetic, parasympathetic, when they reach homeostasis, I personally feel that as a moment of safety, zero stress in the system. Means I have arrived at my safe point. I feel safe. And feeling safe is something that drives my system. It drives my system to want to make myself in a safe environment for my survival. So everything I'm doing is trying to see if I'm under threat. All my senses are out there in the world to see if I'm being threatened. I mobilize my stress handling systems, my fight or flight systems to handle anything I perceive as a threat. I'm vigilant in a certain way. But if I could theoretically find a place where I know that there's no possibility of threat to me, I could relax in a way that's rarely possible for any organism to achieve. In the animal world, it's rare to find a place where I know I'm 100% secure and I don't have to have at least some part of me being vigilant. So what I'm talking about is in these extremely high meditation states, you're able to reach a 0 point in consciousness where you are 100% in zero stress and 100% in my safe space, where I can drop all the vigilance, drop all of the pressure waves that might have to be looking out for myself, to be 100% in my oasis of zero stress, 0 point consciousness, where I am secure and I'm here. And that's what I'm attempting to achieve by orchestrating a state of consciousness with binaural beats and rotating 180 degrees out of phase to create the zero space, and the synchronicity of the hemispheres, which are always a hallmark of enlightenment, synchronizing the hemispheres, where I have access to the higher dimensional answers, problem solving, eurekas, precognitive, out of the body, all of the things that we associate with. I'm not associated with this body anymore. That's a hallmark of enlightenment. So that's part of what all of this science is trying to come together and how we see it reflected in the universe at large. But when I reach a personal 0 point, I have reached a place where I connect with the entire rest of the universe that is populated with an infinite number of 0 points, and all of those points are the same place. They're not spread out throughout the universe because the universe is within me. So when I reach my 0 point, I connect with all 0 points everywhere. And those are outside of time and space. And they're 100% secure. And I feel in my 100% zero stress space. Heaven. Complete relaxation, complete security, complete safety. That is what we really want. That's what we want in our personal lives. That's what we want in our consciousness. That's what we want for the world to be for us. And just like I had described before with the shamans from Hawaii, the kahunas, that if you want abundance, you don't pray for money, because abundance doesn't come from money. Abundance is the sensation that I experience is if money was no object for me, that if I didn't have to worry about that, then what would my experience be like? If I wanted to find my soulmate, the person of pure love for me, I don't have to describe what this person is going to look like or what kind of job they've got or what color of hair they've got. All I have to know is that they would make me feel this way, a certain way of pure peace and openness and ability for me to be 100% who I am, out front, let you know, and it would be okay. and vice versa. So that's all I need to pray for, is that. And when the universe delivers that to me, then whatever that person looked like would be the perfect fit to be part of what makes me feel that way. It wouldn't matter anymore. So this is the same kind of thing I'm trying to accomplish through this series of live streams, of connecting us together, synchronizing up our brains into the same exact spot, rotating out of phase and creating the 0 point. And through a series of these live streams, to begin to explore every avenue that I can of what it means to want, to wish for, to ask God for. God says you can have anything you want. All you have to do is ask for it without words, before a thought, in the moment. And once you get there, what are you going to ask for? And what you're going to ask for is, I'm too small to understand what that is. All I can do is open myself to the divine, infinite field that knows what the perfect moment is, and the perfect world, and the perfect experience, and that's what I'm looking for. And so for us, that's all we have to do, is to open ourselves to be in this safe space and allow a vision to emerge of what perfection is. And as we do that together in this mind link, we open a 0 point in reality to be filled by the definition from infinite spirit to define the perfect earth for us, because we'll know it when we feel it. And what we want the world to be is a sensation that we need to define. We need to try to feel what that would be like. That's what we're asking for, and that's what we do today. And remember, at the center of that is a deep emotion that is hard to define with human words and definitions. It's got words that have to do with spiritual something, with awe, with love, with empathy, with expanding my heart. Those are all paltry words that don't describe what I'm talking about, but we all know what that is. It's a moment of reverence, of bigger than me, bigger than anything I've ever experienced. That's where the awe comes in. That's what we want. That's what we need to find with these soundtracks. And today is no exception. This soundtrack is orchestrating, once again, synchronicity, a certain brain state, 180 degrees out of phase, 0 point in the consciousness, and mind linking all of us together. So our job is to open ourselves up to a vision loading in, come in contact with a true safe place in my being, where I can truly relax in my core and allow the good to arrive and assemble itself around me. So with that being said, here we go. Here's the address again for this soundtrack. You can get me on a number of different social media platforms. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Search for Dr. Jeffrey Thompson. You'll get me there. And once again, you can get me, ask questions or make statements or comments. scientificsounds.com, ask a question. And you can see all the previous live casts in case you haven't seen them all, or if you're new and you'd like to see them all in order. It's a progression of information and experience. So once again, thank you all very much. It is my honor and privilege to be here with you. Peace, joy, love, happiness, and safety until the next time I see you next Sunday.